welcome to That Hoquiam Podcast. I'm your host, City Council President Stephen Pavogel. Let's talk about what's going on in the city of Hoquiam. Hey, welcome to episode 3 of That Hoquiam Podcast. Here I am, Stephen Pavogel, eager to talk with you today. Today I am actually going live. You could be catching this on YouTube or Facebook in the video form right as I record this. And of course, then I'm going to get it out into the audio later in the evening on all of the podcast apps. It looks like that we are good to go with Google and Apple and smart speakers and Spotify and Spreaker and I don't even know what all of the different podcast applications are, but you should be able to get this wherever you get your podcasts. You can ask your smart speaker to play That Hoquiam Podcast and should be good to go. In a related note, I'm going to go ahead and start a separate podcast than this called Harbor Famous, where I just talk to people that I like. It's probably a little bit more on the entertainment side than the news and updates for what's going on in the city of Hoquiam. And it won't be Hoquiam specific. It'll be Grace Harbor, a little bit broader. And so I think right now my plan is to put out an episode every Saturday of That Hoquiam Podcast, where we talk about what's going on in Hoquiam and affecting Hoquiam. And then Harbor Famous on Sundays in the afternoons. Sometimes they'll be live like today, and other times I'll record it earlier and then just release it on those days. So I plan to keep to that schedule as best I can and go from there. So today's episode, I do not have a guest. I've been working on, I think I have some pretty exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, but today it's just a real simple, just kind of keep up on what's going on in the city of Hoquiam and related. And so some of this related to COVID-19, coronavirus, the stay-at-home order, and things related to that, some on the city council. But actually, the first thing I wanted to talk about today is, of course, the census. So last week, I talked about the census. It happens every 10 years in the United States. It's required under the Constitution that we count everybody that is in the U.S., not just citizens, but also residents. And so it's really important. And what happens is they take those numbers every 10 years, and that makes a big difference in funding for hospitals and schools, and also for how you're represented at both at the city, county, congressional level, so on and so forth. So it's super, super important that everybody does the census, that somebody in every household does the census. And so last week I talked about how we were right about 45 point something percent in the city of Hoquiam. We're kind of lagging behind the state. And the question is, where are we now? Well, a week later, Hoquiam is at 46.8%. We got just a little over 1% this week. So not great. We need to come a long ways and that kind of thing. Are we in last place? By no means. We are ahead of the county, even though we are behind the state. Some places are up at like 70% response rate. We're at a little over 46. Are we ahead of Aberdeen? That's the most important question. Is Hoquiam ahead of Aberdeen? Yes, we are ahead of Aberdeen by about like 1%. So not great. Are we winning the county overall? Well, on that front, the answer is no, I don't think so. This, I don't know, this is the highest in the county, but Montesano is at 59.8%. So maybe we need to call up Mayor Samuel in Montesano and say, what is it that you've got going in Montesano that you've got such a great response rate that as of April 16th, Montesano is at 59.8%. And so it's super important that we kind of take that on and just do it, get it done. I've heard a lot of people really worried this week about the hospital and its solvency over the next weeks and years and that kind of thing. Completing the census is a very big, important step towards getting that done. Okay, you're tired of me talking about the census? Fine, we're done talking about the census for now. But we can talk about schools. So, schools. Things are actually kind of getting back to, well, not really normal in the Hoquiam School District. Obviously, there's still a lot of distance learning, but you could certainly tell if you've got students in the Hoquiam District that things are ramping up. There's a lot more classes going on by Zoom and resources and going on. And last week was spring break. This week, they're definitely back in full on school mode, although it be that kind of remote learning. And so school definitely looks very different this year. If you get a chance, go to the school district's website, hoquiam.net. You don't have to dig very far, but if you look on the front page, they've got some great shots of kids doing some things like construction and reading and gardening and you know, those life skills that you always said, geez, shouldn't kids be learning those in schools? Well, now's the opportunity for them to be learning a lot of things. Especially home ec and feeding themselves. No, but on the school district front, so I'm hearing that the district is working really hard on trying to get a graduation this year and trying to figure out what form that's going to take. But there's definitely an all-out effort to make sure that the class of 2020 is fully honored. Last night, April 17th, school districts all over the state lit the high school stadiums at 8:20, that being 2020 in military time, to honor this class. But, you know, how do we get them a ceremony? I don't know all the answers to that, but the school district's definitely working really hard on that. The school district or school board meeting was originally scheduled for this past week, but they had pushed it forward to this coming week. So there's a school board meeting on Monday, April 20th at 5:30. That is a Zoom meeting. And then that's kind of the setup meeting they do in advance. And then on Thursday, April 23rd, I believe, also at 5:30 on Zoom, they will have a school board meeting then. And I will do my best to see if I can get that streamed onto the Facebook and the YouTube. I don't count those as episodes, but if I can get it to make it a little bit easier for you, I will do my best so that you can watch it in real time or even after the fact. But I'm not quite sure if that's going to work out technically. So we'll see. Stay tuned. So that's what's going on with the school board. Really important note is that they are certainly still doing grab and go lunches for kids under the age of 18. They don't have to be enrolled in the Hoquiam School District. They could have been put out of place, that kind of thing, or they could have been home link or whatever. But there is definitely where you can go and you can pick up lunch for that day and breakfast for the next day. It's kind of set up to go. It's outside in the parking lots. They have it at Central and Emerson and Lincoln schools, and of course at the YMCA. And then there's also a little bit out or non-traditional. There's Rosewood Manor on the north side of town, Washington School, the Red Rooster heading out, and of course the Capalis Crossing Fire Station outside the city a bit, but certainly well within the Hoquiam School District, and those kids need to be fed too. So we want to make sure that kids are eating over this, and I do know that there is some, I couldn't find all the details right when I wanted them, but I've certainly seen things about this is going on the weekends as well. Some of the churches have been pitching in and making sure. I know that I've seen them out at Emerson, and I believe some of the other schools, probably the YMCA, on the weekend as well. So not just the traditional school days, but on the weekends as well. So make sure that kiddos are eating. One of the things that I've seen come up on Nextdoor, that kind of social media app for your neighbors and stuff like that, is talking about masks. Who should be wearing a mask? What kind of a mask? Is that a good idea, a bad idea? That kind of thing. So early on, the CDC said that only people with that are really sick, or that either they have the coronavirus, or they're vulnerable, or a medical professional should have a mask. And that was partly so they could get a handle on supplies. It's really hard to, if you're watching this online, I have an N95 mask that I pulled out of the garage. I did not go run out and find this N95 mask. This is one that we had from a few years back from a sanding project. And so certainly not one that we want to be using in the hospital. So it's full of dust. But the N95 mask has a filter on the front, and it's kind of that disposable, that papery kind of fabric. And so certainly they're asking for those to be saved for hospitals and medical professionals, that kind of thing. But the guidance for everybody else has changed, that they do want folks to wear a kind of a cloth mask. And they have some recommendations on things that you can do, a homemade cloth covering, that kind of thing. And so what kinds of things should be doing? If you're watching, I'm showing off one that my mother-in-law made for me, a nice simple fabric mask with the elastic to hold it on. So if you go to cdc.gov/coronavirus, you can see the recommendations for cloth face coverings. And who do they want to wear them? Well, they want anybody to wear them if you are out in public and that social distancing can't happen. And because you might not be sick, but you might be sick and not know it. You might have the virus. You might be a carrier and not have any symptoms. And we certainly don't want you spreading. You say, well, I'm clean, I'm this, that, when you're even just talking like this, you could be putting stuff out into the air. And so we're not asking for you, we're asking you to protect others. So if you're out in public around other people, does that mean if you're out walking on the sidewalk, you have to wear a mask? Maybe not if you're, as long as you're avoiding other people walking the neighborhood, you could potentially go out without wearing a mask. But if you're going in the store, you should be wearing a mask. If you're going to so many different activities, if you're even going to pick up your takeout, you should probably be wearing a mask when you're doing that. And that is not just for people that are sick, but really kind of everybody. We know that as of when I checked this morning, there were 12 confirmed cases in Grays Harbor County. So largely we've avoided this so far and managed to make the spread slow down. But I'm getting really concerned as we're seeing some other places lifting restrictions very early. And so personally, I'm worried. I'm worried about the health of the people in this community and in other communities, that this might end up going longer by non-compliance. I understand that people want to get out and they want to do their thing. Well, you can get out and still maintain social distancing and still be respectful of other people that are more vulnerable than you are. So I'm just asking you, please just comply and do this, and we'll do our best to get things up and going again. So that's masks. We had a meeting on Monday of the Hoquiam City Council. We held it by Zoom. It was very interesting. We had almost all the council members were able to get in, and we held business. We had staff on there and that kind of thing, and we had the media, and we had some citizens that were able to log in. I did manage to stream that one to the YouTube and Facebook page so people could watch it. but doing meetings by Zoom is a lot slower than if you're used to doing them in person. It's awkward, but it's probably going to be the reality for at least a few more meetings, and who knows for how long. I certainly don't, but there was business that had to be done, so we did. We held a public hearing on the parks plan. So this was something that had to be done. It was kind of put out on the city website beforehand, and then we opened up a hearing and we had the opportunity for people to comment, and we did not get any comments during that time. And then there was also one about applying for community development block grant. As we recover from this, and I'm not talking about the health side, but when I talk about the economic recovery that we need to do, those community development block grants are going to be so important. And getting construction dollars going in our community. Construction and capital projects are often the most reliable and quick way that government entities can take care of things that needed to be happening anyway and get the economy going again. When people build, then they spend, and that kind of thing. And we know that construction is definitely taking a hit right now during the stay-at-home order. That once those orders get lifted, we want to get building, shovel ready, that kind of thing. We want to make sure that we're in a good position with things like the North Shore levee projects and the West levee project to get Hoquiam built, that infrastructure that we needed anyhow. We want to make sure that those jobs are happening and coming, and so we have to stay ahead of the game with like the community development block grant. And so we had hearings on those items and didn't hear anything at that point. We did get notification that the library renovation has been completed. We accepted the notice of completion. There is still some work, I think, to do with the elevators, but I think the door issues have been fixed. I'd have to double check on that. But there is still some elevator work that was kind of a little bit unrelated that still needs to happen. And so good news there, and looking forward to that. Another interesting thing is we had a report from the Public Utilities Committee recommending that we put a vote out for what's called a transportation benefit district. Well, what is a public transportation benefit district? It's something that we would form as a city. Aberdeen has it that they've used. And what it would do is it would put a small sales tax. I don't remember the percent. It's pretty small. But what it does is it creates dollars that can be used for sidewalks and roads and places that we just have a hard time getting funding for, that just need to be fixed. We all know some places around town that we need to get a few dollars for to fix. And so the committee, before all this had happened, had put forward a report to put this on the ballot so voters could decide, do we want to have what that sales tax is? And like I said, I don't remember the exact percent. It's very, very small. But do we want to put that forward so that we could fix some of these roads in town? And it's ultimately the voters' decision. So after some debate and clarification of how this process works, we decided to go ahead and do the accept the report, but that does not create the ordinance to actually put it on the ballot. So there's certainly some concern from folks that were really wanting to see this go forward, say that we want to make sure that we want to wait wait until we're in a little better position before we ask the voters to give us a little bit of money for fixing these roads. So when is that coming? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows at this point when that's going to happen. But when it does, we know that we're going to make sure that it's right for Hoquiam, and then it will be ultimately in the voters' hands. There was also a report from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. So this is funds that the city collects on hotels and motels and stuff like that have to go to tourism related things. So there was kind of an awarding of dollars for some different events that bring people into town. You can look at the list and go that, well, some of those things obviously aren't happening this year. And so what happens is, so those events can either do the event this year and do that. And by the way, it's a reimbursement. So it's not like they just get the money and then spend it. They have to spend the money and then they get reimbursed for having done the work. And so we don't know which of these are going forward. I think the Shorebird Festival is off, although the birds are still coming. So we'll get a chance to look at it ourselves as long as we are social distancing and walking and not going down and being around each other. But we can watch the shorebirds kind of come in, but we don't want people coming in from out of town for that. And then the Easter egg hunt, actually the supplies were bought for the Easter egg hunt in advance. Obviously the Easter egg hunt did not happen, but those eggs have been getting out to kids, I believe, with the lunches, but I'm not entirely sure what that's going. So any funds that these organizations aren't able to use this year, they will go ahead and will carry over to next year and can be reawarded. And so maybe that pool is just going to be a little bit bigger. We can have some bigger celebrations next year. So that's really all that I can say about that front, because we just don't know, what festivals are happening and how that's going to go. One of the things that came up during the city council meeting is there's been a lot of issues with Zoom, especially on public meetings where people can jump in and they can comment and say all sorts of lewd things that are public and that kind of thing. And it didn't happen at the beginning of the meeting when we were asking for public comment, but about partway through the meeting, it became a really popular destination for some kids, well, somewhere else. I don't know where they were or if they were even kids, but somebody somewhere else decided that our meeting was a great opportunity to be lewd. And so because it wasn't during the comment period, we immediately shut those comments off in the chat. And then they have kind of this other function where people can comment. It's kind of a Q&A function where people can put their comment, their questions to ask the panelists being the council. And they were frankly horrific, nothing that we would ever expect to see in a city council meeting. Things that were racist, homophobic, and rude, and certainly not something that we would have expected to see in a Hoquiam City Council meeting by any stretch. So I went ahead and put forward a motion which passed not unanimously. There were some people that were concerned about it. So comments for future city council meetings are going to be taken in advance by email. And so before we have that next city council meeting, which would be, I guess, probably the 27th. I don't have the calendar right in front of me, but the Monday after next, if you have comments that you would like to put in for the city council and the public to see, you will email those to the city. I believe we'll have you email those to Tracy Wood. It's going to be on the cityofhoquiam.com website, how to do that public comment, but I think you will email Tracy Wood, who will then gather that public comment for us to see, and we can respond to it. But if you do so, please make sure to include your name and your home address, so that way we can really kind of honor your thoughts and opinions by this council. I know that it's your thoughts and opinions of this council. We want to make sure that you are being heard. and it's really hard to hear you when there's a bunch of people from somewhere else, somewhere in the world, just jumping in and screaming. I don't even know what else to say about it. They're just being silly and rude. Let's put it that way. I didn't see all the comments, but I certainly saw enough that it's not something that is productive, and we want to make sure that we're being productive for you, not just me, but the other city council members, the staff, and the mayor. Recovery is going to be a lot of work for a lot of people. I did have an opportunity to speak with Derek Kilmer yesterday, our congressman, and he wants to make sure that the people here are being heard and they're getting what they need. I do know that they're looking at what they can do in Congress to get more relief to the area, and so. How does that work? How do people that didn't get their stimulus because they didn't have a regular bank account but maybe had a H&R Block card or something like that, how do they get that? So that is definitely on the radar of our congressional delegation, and I'm hoping they can figure that out. If you did get your stimulus and you have a little bit to spare, please make sure to support our local businesses and support our local charities. They could certainly use it. It's a tough time for everybody, but some a little bit more. So please make sure to help out where you can, if you can. We know that there's some folks doing a lot of great work, whether they be sewing masks or doing deliveries or doing that kind of thing, whatever they can. Or certainly people are definitely sticking together, and it's heartwarming. So thank you for all of that. And let's see. I think that's all that I have on that. For those that don't know, in Hoquiam, we have this kind of a ward system. So that means just really quick on the city council, there's 12 different members of the city council representing 6 areas of town. Each ward has 2 council members. And I represent Ward 2, which is kind of downtown in that west part across the river, kind of, from between Little Hoquiam River and or between Hoquiam River and the YMCA, just about, and of course a good chunk of downtown. But don't be afraid to reach out to your city council members. Tell them what's on your mind. And what the city can do to help you, and how can we communicate with our other representatives, whether it be at the state level or the federal level, to make it work for you. It's going to be a long road. It's going to be probably a couple of years of recovery, regardless of how long the health part of this crisis lasts. The economic recovery is going to take a couple of years on top of that to get to. So to work through. So it's going to be a lot of hard work. We still got things to do. We still have kids to honor, seniors to take care of, and it's going to be a long haul. But I'm really glad that you joined me today. And like I said, I'm going to put these out on Facebook and YouTube on Saturday afternoon. Sometimes, like today, it's going to be live and in real time. Other times, I'll maybe record it ahead of time and then just release it at those times. And then after that, then I'll take that audio and I'll put it out in podcast format. Wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Podcast Addict or Google or Apple, or ask your Google Assistant or Siri or whatnot to play that Hoquiam podcast. And it should work. It might take a couple hours to get the most recent episode, but episode 1 where I talked with Mayor Winkleman, and episode 2 where I talked to Shannon and Allison Patterson, those are out there. And I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend a little bit of time with me. Also, like I said, starting tomorrow, that would be April 19th on Sundays, I'm going to do Harbor Famous, where I just talk to kind of people that I find interesting around Grays Harbor, whether they be, in the city of Hoquiam or not, but certainly entertaining folks. It's going to be a little bit more lighthearted than some of this more business related stuff that we have on that Hoquiam podcast. So tomorrow's will be going live with Jason White and Brian Blackburn, where we'll kind of joke around and enjoy our quarantines together, I suppose. if this can be enjoyed. Really stay in there, stick in there, wash your hands, wear a mask when you're around other folks. And whether it be, kind of a homemade mask, or if you're doing something with a bandana, there's certainly some really cool tutorials. Check out Matthew McConaughey with a bandana and a coffee filter, and what you can do to make a really quick down and dirty mask. Lots of great options out there. Until then, I want to thank you, and I will see you next week.